I am a 60-year-old farmer. And on Christmas morning last year, I almost died on my own land. Not from old age. Not from a bad harvest. Not from loneliness after my wife passed. But from something much colder. Betrayal. I live alone on our family farm in western Iowa. 217 acres of corn and soybeans. The deed says the land has been in our family since 1919. My grandfather bought it for $3,200 after returning from the war. I still keep the original receipt folded in a tin box in my bedroom dresser. My wife, Mary, used to joke that the land knew my footsteps better than she did. She passed away 3 years ago. Heart failure. Quick. Too quick. 1 minute she was telling me I was overwatering the tomatoes, the next minute she was gone. After she died, the house got louder in strange ways. The fridge humming, the boards creaking, the wind slipping through the barn like it owned the place. I got used to it. What I didn't get used to was how often my daughter started calling. At first, I thought she was just worried about me. She lives about 45 minutes away in Cedar Rapids. Married, 2 kids, mortgage, credit cards, life. Dad, she'd say casually, have you ever had the property appraised? Or, Dad, farmland's selling for over $11,000 an acre around here. You know that, right? I'd laugh it off. Well, I'd say, unless someone's planning on digging me up and selling me with it, I don't see the rush. She wouldn't laugh as hard as she used to. Then she started asking about my will. I do have one. Drew it up in 2018 with a local attorney in town. Split evenly between my son and daughter. Simple. Fair. Or so I thought. She asked about power of attorney. About medical directives. About what would happen if something sudden occurred. Something about the way she said that word. Sudden. Made my stomach tighten. Still, she's my daughter. I changed her diapers. I taught her how to ride a bike in the gravel driveway. I paid for half her college tuition. You don't suspect your own blood. Not at first. In early December, she called with excitement in her voice. Dad, we should do Christmas at the farm this year. I nearly dropped the phone. It had been years since the whole family gathered here. After Mary died, holidays became quiet affairs. My son usually came by Christmas Eve, brought the grandkids for cookies. My daughter preferred hosting at her place. More modern, less dusty old barn, as she once described it. But now she wanted the farm. All of us together, she said warmly. Like old times. I'll admit it, I got emotional. I even cleaned the place like a man expecting company from royalty. Scrubbed the kitchen floor on my knees. Repaired the porch railing. Hung fresh lights along the barn roofline. Maybe I wanted to believe something had shifted back toward family. Maybe I was lonely enough to ignore what my gut was whispering. The first strange thing happened 3 days before Christmas. I was in the barn, checking the heater near the feed storage. The winters here bite hard, and if pipes freeze, you're looking at a repair bill that makes you question your life choices. That's when I stepped near the old tool bench and heard a hollow thud under my boot. I stepped back. One of the wooden planks in the floor shifted slightly. It hadn't done that before. I knelt down, pressed on it with my palm. Loose. Very loose. Too loose. I lifted it carefully. Below it was a dark opening about 3 feet deep, an unfinished pit near an old drainage area. Anyone stepping wrong could easily fall, hit their head, maybe break a hip. At 60, that's not just embarrassing. That's dangerous. I stared at it for a long time. The board hadn't rotted through. The nails weren't rusted out. It looked tampered with. I told myself I was being paranoid. Barn's age. Wood shifts. Gravity does its thing. Still, I hammered the plank back down tight and drove in 2 fresh screws. Just in case. The second thing happened on December 22nd. I take medication for blood pressure. Lisinopril. Small white tablets. I keep them in a weekly pill organizer Mary bought me years ago. That morning, I opened the Monday compartment. The pills looked identical at first glance. But when I held one closer to the window light, I noticed the imprint wasn't quite the same. Instead of L10, it had a different marking. Faint. Hard to see. I stood there for a good 5 minutes. I sniffed one. Yes, I sniffed my pills. Old habit. Sniffing didn't smell different, but something felt off. I drove into town and asked the pharmacist to double-check them. She frowned almost immediately. "These aren't your prescription," she said quietly. "What are they?" She typed something into her computer. "This is a beta blocker not prescribed to you. In higher doses or combined incorrectly, it can cause serious cardiovascular issues." My ears rang. "Like what?" I asked. "Like sudden blood pressure drops, fainting, cardiac events." Sudden. That word again. I didn't confront anyone. Not yet. Instead, I called my son. He's 38. Works in Des Moines. Level-headed. Practical. Less emotional than his sister. I told him about the floorboard. The medication. He didn't laugh. He didn't tell me I was imagining things. He got quiet. "Dad," he said slowly. "Who has access to the house?" I swallowed. "Family," I said. "Mostly." He hesitated. Then, "I have a friend on the force. Let me make a call. Don't take any more pills. Don't say anything to anyone." That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat in Mary's old rocking chair by the window, watching snow drift across the fields. 217 acres. Worth, if my daughter was right, maybe $2.3 million at current rates. I never thought of it as money. I thought of it as soil, history, sweat. But maybe someone else saw numbers. Maybe someone else saw inheritance. Or maybe I was losing my mind. I kept replaying her questions in my head. Appraisals, power of attorney, sudden events. I remembered how she insisted on helping organize my paperwork when she visited in October. Said she wanted to make things easier. I remembered leaving her alone in my office for about 15 minutes while I fixed the tractor battery. I remembered her asking where I kept important documents. I remembered answering. On December 24th, my son arrived early. He hugged me longer than usual. A police officer followed him in an unmarked SUV. That's when I realized this wasn't imagination anymore. This was something else. And whatever it was about to surface. The officer introduced himself as Daniels. Mid-40s. Calm eyes. The kind of man who looks like he listens more than he talks. We sat at my kitchen table, the same oak table Mary and I bought in 1989 for $600 cash. It still wobbles slightly on the left leg. I laid everything out. The loose floorboard. The medication swap. The questions about inheritance. Daniels didn't interrupt. Just took notes. "Has anyone had access to your prescriptions?" he asked. "My daughter was here in October. Helped organize things. Anyone else?" "Not really." He nodded slowly. "Do you still have the pills?" I handed him the bottle from the pharmacy. He sealed it in an evidence bag. Then he asked something that made my throat tighten. "Has your daughter expressed financial stress recently?" I hesitated. She and her husband refinanced their house last year. He switched jobs. There were some comments about debt. "How much debt?" I heard around $180,000 total. Between mortgage balance, credit cards, and a small business loan that didn't work out. Daniels scribbled something down. Motives don't always look evil. Sometimes they look like bills. That afternoon, while the grandkids were sledding outside and my daughter was busy decorating cookies in the kitchen, Daniels quietly asked her to step outside to his vehicle. She looked confused. "Is something wrong?" "Just a few routine questions," he said politely. I watched from the living room window. Snow falling lightly. Christmas lights blinking red and green against white fields. She crossed her arms while talking. Defensive posture. I've known that stance since she was 13. Inside, my son sat beside me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. I wasn't. I felt like I was watching my own life from across the road. Daniels returned 20 minutes later. "Sir," he said quietly, "we'd like to conduct a more formal review of your legal documents. Do you keep originals on site?" "Yes, in my office." We walked down the hallway together. My office still smells faintly like old paper and tractor oil. Filing cabinet by the wall. Desk facing the window. He asked me to show him my will. I opened the top drawer. It was there. May I check your files? I stepped aside. He searched methodically. Then he stopped. There's something here. He pulled out a folder I didn't recognize. Inside was a document granting durable power of attorney to my daughter, signed in what looked like my handwriting. Dated November 14th. I stared at it. That's not my signature. It was close. Close enough to fool someone glancing quickly. But not me. Mine slants more left. The loop in the J of my name is tighter. This one was practiced. Imitated. Forged. Daniels looked at me carefully. Did you sign this?
No.
My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. They took the document for analysis. Over the next 48 hours, things moved faster than I expected. The pills were confirmed to be replaced intentionally. The forged document had been notarized, but the notary stamp was from an office closed 2 years ago. That detail broke something inside me. This wasn't desperation. This was planning. Careful. Layered. Thought out. The loose floorboard suddenly didn't feel accidental anymore. Daniels asked if I'd allow a quiet surveillance approach through Christmas morning. He believed there might be an attempt to execute the power of attorney or create a medical emergency scenario. That phrase, medical emergency scenario, felt clinical. But what it meant was simple. If I fell, if I collapsed, if I died, someone could step in legally before questions were asked. 217 acres. $2.3 million. Transferred. Neatly. I signed the cooperation agreement without hesitation. If this was happening, it would not happen in the dark. Christmas Eve dinner was strangely normal. Mashed potatoes. Green beans with too much butter. My daughter laughed at something her husband said. I studied her face. She looked like my little girl. Same freckles. Same crooked smile. How do you reconcile that with forged signatures? With altered medication? With a loosened board in a barn? At one point she reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm really glad we're all here, Dad. So am I said. And for a second I meant it, because part of me still hoped I was wrong. That night I didn't take any medication. I placed the real prescription bottle back in my drawer. The fake ones remained with the police. My son stayed in the guest room. 2 unmarked cars parked down the gravel road, out of sight. We didn't tell the rest of the family. Daniels believed if there was intent, it would surface when the opportunity felt right. Morning. Christmas Day. Snow thicker now. Quiet. I went to the barn early, like I always do. My daughter followed me 10 minutes later. Thought I'd see where you disappear to every morning, she said lightly. We walked toward the feed storage area, toward the repaired floorboard. I had loosened it again the night before, under police instruction. Enough to shift. Daniels was positioned behind the equipment shed with a clear view. I pretended not to notice the board. Stepped near it. She watched carefully. Too carefully. Careful there, Dad, she said, but didn't reach out. I stepped directly onto the plank. It shifted. I wobbled. And in that split second, I saw something in her eyes. Not fear. Not concern. Calculation. I caught myself on the tool bench and steadied. She froze. Behind us, boots crunched on snow. Daniels stepped into view. Ma'am, he said calmly. We need to talk. Her face drained of color. What is this? She demanded. He explained the medication, the forged power of attorney, the investigation. Her husband emerged from the house, confusion turning into panic. She looked at me, and in that look I finally understood. It wasn't anger at being accused. It was anger at being interrupted. I was just trying to secure things, she said sharply. He's old. Things happen. By replacing his medication? Daniels asked. She didn't answer. By forging legal documents? Silence. I stood there, snow melting on my boots. My daughter, in handcuffs, on Christmas morning. The grandchildren watching from the porch. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and pulled something vital out. Daniels read her rights. She didn't cry. Neither did I. Not yet. The squad car disappeared down the gravel road just after 9:40 a.m. Snow kept falling like nothing had happened. That was the strange part. The barn still stood. The cattle still needed feeding. The wind still moved across 217 acres like it always had. But something permanent had shifted. My son walked toward me slowly. "You okay, Dad?" I nodded once. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat down right there in the snow beside the barn wall. Not because I couldn't stand. Because I didn't trust my legs. The rest of Christmas passed in fragments. My son's wife took the grandchildren inside. Her husband, my son-in-law, left in his own truck without saying a word to me. I later learned he claimed he didn't know the details. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. Ignorance is sometimes a choice. Daniels came back in the afternoon with more information. There were emails, drafts saved on a laptop discussing land transfer timing, messages referencing before he changes the will. There had been a consultation with a real estate attorney 3 weeks earlier. The attorney believed my daughter already had legal authority. Because of the forged power of attorney, she had been laying groundwork. Slowly, quietly, the medication swap wasn't random. It was strategic. Daniels explained that in certain scenarios, hospitalization, cognitive impairment power of attorney could be activated quickly, especially if supported by medical documentation. If I had collapsed in that barn, if I had hit my head on that pit, if my blood pressure had spiked or crashed, things could have moved fast. And once paperwork moves fast, reversing it can take years. Sometimes you don't reverse it at all. I didn't press charges. The state did. Attempted fraud, forgery, criminal negligence related to medication tampering. When I was asked if I wanted to show mercy, I gave the most honest answer I could. "I want the truth," I said. Mercy without truth is just delay. The court process began in February. Cold mornings, gray skies, the kind of winter that makes metal ache. I wore the same dark suit I had worn to Mary's funeral. Fit looser now. In the courtroom, she avoided my eyes at first. Then one day she looked directly at me. There was no hatred there, just resentment. "You were going to leave it half to him," she said during one recess, referring to my son. "Yes. He doesn't even farm. Neither do you." Silence. Then, "We needed help." There it was. Need, debt, pressure. And somewhere along the way, that pressure turned into entitlement, which turned into planning, which turned into action, and then into handcuffs. The evidence was clean. The pharmacy records, the forged document analysis, the outdated notary seal, the emails. Her defense attorney tried to argue she was protecting the estate. Protecting, by replacing medication, by altering legal documents, by preparing for a sudden event. It didn't hold. She accepted a plea deal in late April. Reduced charges in exchange for admission and restitution of investigative costs. Probation. Community service.
Permanent criminal record.
No jail time. Some people said I should have pushed harder. Demanded prison. But here's something I learned sitting alone on that porch in the weeks after Christmas. Prison wouldn't fix what broke. It wouldn't restore the daughter who used to chase fireflies in this field. It wouldn't unteach whatever belief told her this was justified. And revenge, the loud kind, burns fast. Cold justice lasts longer. I made changes. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. First, I updated my will. Not to punish. To protect. The farm will now remain in a trust. Managed professionally. Neither child can sell it outright. Income from crop leases will be distributed evenly, but ownership stays structured. Second, I transferred medical power of attorney to my son, with oversight from an independent attorney. Third, I installed cameras in the barn. Yes, I did. 60-year-old farmer with security cameras. Mary would have laughed. Sniffing, probably called me dramatic. But I prefer dramatic to dead. Spring came slowly. The snow melted. The fields softened. Planting season forced me back into rhythm. And rhythm is healing. I still think about that morning sometimes. The way she watched my foot near that board. The stillness in her face. It wasn't rage. It wasn't desperation in that second. It was calculation. That's the part that hurts most. Not the willingness to let something happen. To her own father. She calls occasionally now. Short conversations. Careful words. There's an invisible wall between us. Trust, once cracked, doesn't glue back seamlessly. It shows, like a scar across old wood. But I answer the phone, because bitterness is a second poison. And I've had enough poison for one lifetime. In the evenings, I sit on the porch. The land looks the same as it did when my grandfather first walked it. Same horizon. Same wind. Same stubborn soil. 217 acres. Still here. So am I. And maybe that's the quiet victory. Not revenge. Not triumph. Just survival. It's been a year now. One full cycle of seasons. Planting. Growing. Harvest. Snow. The farm doesn't care about scandal. Corn still needs to be planted at the right depth. Soybeans still depend on rain. The cattle still complain at 5:30 every morning like they're running the place. Routine is humbling that way. It reminds you that your personal disasters are small compared to the rhythm of soil and sky. In July, my daughter asked if she could visit alone. No husband. No kids. Just her. I thought about saying no. I thought about telling her to meet me somewhere neutral. Coffee shop in town. Maybe. Somewhere without barn floors and paperwork and ghosts. But I said yes. She arrived on a humid afternoon. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Looked tired. We sat on the porch. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally she said, "I didn't think it would go that far." I didn't respond. She continued. "We were drowning. Creditors were calling. We thought, if something happened naturally and I already had authority, I could stabilize things. Sell a portion. Just enough. By replacing my medication?" I asked quietly. She flinched. "I wasn't trying to kill you. Intent is a slippery thing. You don't have to aim for death to risk it." "You loosen that board," I said. Silence. She stared out at the fields. "I just thought you're stubborn. You'd never sell. You'd never help us the way we needed." Help. That word again. Help can become justification if you stretch it far enough. Here's the part one didn't expect. I didn't yell. I didn't throw her off the porch. I didn't list every sacrifice I made raising her. I simply said, "You stopped seeing me as your father." She looked confused. "You started seeing me as an obstacle," I continued. "Or a timeline. That's what hurt most. I wasn't dad anymore. I was an aging asset. A future event. A number. And once someone reduces you to a number, empathy gets smaller." She cried then. Not dramatic sobbing. Quiet tears. "I don't know when I changed," she said. "I do. It happens slowly. Pressure. Comparison. Fear. Debt.
Pride.
Little compromises. Little rationalizations. Until one day, forging a signature feels like problem solving. I told her something simple. You needed help. You chose control. That's the difference. Control tries to force outcomes. Help asks. We didn't fix everything that day. We didn't hug dramatically. But we did something harder. We stayed. We sat in discomfort. And for the first time since Christmas, I felt like I was speaking to my daughter again. Not the strategist, not the planner. Just the woman who once scraped her knee in this driveway and ran to me crying. Healing isn't loud. It's repetitive. Like farming. The legal structure remains unchanged. The trust stays. The oversight stays. Consequences don't vanish because tears appear. But conversations have started. She's in financial counseling now. Working through debt legally. Slowly. It will take years. So does rebuilding trust. In the evenings, I still sit on this porch. The sunset hasn't changed its schedule. Some nights I think about how close things came to turning differently. If I hadn't noticed the pill imprint. If I hadn't called my son. If pride had kept me silent. There's a lesson there. Not about revenge. About awareness. We're taught that loyalty means ignoring suspicion when it involves family. That's dangerous. Loyalty without boundaries becomes blindness. And blindness can be fatal. People in town whisper sometimes. Small communities always do. Some say I was too harsh. Some say I was too soft. Here's the truth. The best revenge wasn't humiliation. It wasn't prison. It wasn't cutting her out entirely. It was refusing to be a victim. It was choosing the law over emotion, clarity over denial, structure over chaos, cold decisions over hot reactions. My son visits more often now. We talk about crop rotation and estate planning in the same breath. He doesn't push. He just shows up. That matters. The grandchildren still run through the fields. They don't fully understand what happened. And that's okay. Children shouldn't carry adult betrayals. They should carry fireflies. Sometimes I walk to the barn and look at that floorboard. I replaced it completely. New wood, reinforced underneath. Stronger than before. I suppose that's symbolic whether I intended it or not. Damage exposed. Structure rebuilt. Better supported.
I'm 60.
Maybe I've got 20 good years left if I'm lucky. Maybe more. Maybe less. But they'll be lived awake. Alert. Not paranoid. Just aware. There's a difference. And if there's one thing I've learned sitting on this land that's outlived 3 generations, it's this: love deeply, but verify quietly, trust warmly, but protect wisely. Because sometimes the greatest act of love isn't sacrifice. It's self-preservation. The farm still stands. So do I. And that's enough. There's something about late autumn light on farmland. It doesn't rush. It stretches. Long shadows across harvested rows. Gold over brown. Quiet over noise. I've come to appreciate that kind of light. It doesn't demand attention. It just shows you what's there. After everything's settled. Court dates. Paperwork. Awkward conversations. I did something small but important. I visited the cemetery. Mary's headstone sits under an old maple tree. The leaves were half gone, clinging stubbornly to branches like they weren't ready to let go. I stood there a long time. I handled it, I told her. That might sound foolish, talking to a headstone, but when you've spent 34 years married to someone, their absence still feels like a presence. I didn't explode, I continued. Didn't pretend it didn't happen either. A breeze moved through the tree. I took that as approval. Here's the thing about revenge. The dramatic kind feels satisfying in movies. Yelling in court. Cutting people off forever. Public humiliation. But real life isn't a movie. Real revenge, the kind that lasts, is quiet. It's updating legal documents. It's building structures no one can tamper with. It's refusing to let betrayal define your final chapters. I didn't win because she was arrested. I won because I stayed alive. Because I paid attention. Because I asked for help instead of protecting someone else's wrongdoing. The farm trust finalized in August. Income distribution set at 50/50ths. Ownership locked for 25 years minimum. Professional oversight required for any major financial move.
No sudden signatures. No quiet transfers. No shortcuts.
Some might say I tightened control. I'd say I strengthened foundation. There's a difference. A barn reinforced after termites isn't paranoid. It's practical. My daughter and I now meet once a month. Public places at first. Now sometimes here. We don't talk about the case much. We talk about budgeting apps. Her kids' school projects. The rising cost of groceries. Ordinary things. Ordinary is underrated. Trust rebuilds in ordinary moments. Not dramatic apologies. Consistency. Showing up when you say you will. Answering calls. Not asking about land value. Not once. My son remains steady. He never gloated. Never said, "I told you so." He simply stood beside me when I needed him. That's loyalty. Quiet. Reliable. Not flashy. The grandchildren still run through the corn stubble in October. They chase each other, trip, laugh. Sometimes they ask, "Grandpa, will this farm always be here?" I tell them, as long as someone respects it. That answer means more now. Respect isn't automatic. It's earned, maintained, protected. People ask if I forgave her. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's maintenance. Some days are easier than others. But I don't wake up angry. That's progress. Anger is heavy. And farming already gives you enough weight to carry. If you're listening to this and you're my age you can love someone deeply and still lock your filing cabinet. You can care about your children and still verify signatures. You can hope for the best and prepare for the worst. Those ideas aren't opposites. They're partners. The loose floorboard is gone now. I replaced that entire section of barn flooring. Thicker wood. Steel reinforcement underneath. You could park a tractor on it. Sometimes I step there deliberately, just to feel the strength. To remind myself that weakness exposed can become strength rebuilt. Winter is coming again soon. Another Christmas. We'll gather again this year. Yes, again. Different. More cautious. More honest. But together. That's not weakness. That's maturity. Life doesn't hand you perfect endings. It hands you choices after damage. You can choose rage. You can choose denial. Or you can choose structure. I chose structure. And in doing that, I chose myself. 217 acres. Still here. The wind still moves like it always has. I'm still here too. 60 years old. Wiser. A little sadder. But stronger. And that's the kind of revenge that doesn't fade with time. It stands. Just like the farm.